What's up guys, my name is Ace, and yesterday we got the big gunplay update for Battlefield 6 that changed quite a bit of how the weapons performed, and while I've already covered the recoil and spread adjustments that took place with that, and that applied essentially across the board, today we're going to be focusing on all of the new damage values as well as, more importantly, body multiplier adjustments that took place with most of the guns in the game. And this is quite important information to know because these body multipliers have a different impact depending on the gun. It's going to be more punishing for some guns compared to others. And so first, let's dive into the basics here before getting into the individual weapons and how this had an impact. When it comes to your standard automatic weapons, this applies to everything aside from DMRs, shotguns, sniper rifles, and sidearms. The sidearms didn't get extra body multipliers here. With this, they introduced a 0.84 multiplier to your arms, abdomen, and legs, whereas you deal the standard amount of damage to the chest. And then they also slightly improved our headshot multipliers here across the board. And I'm sure many of you may have noticed that the damage values themselves have gone up a little bit in many cases here. So for the 25 damage guns, for instance, now you'll see they're dealing 26 damage to the chest. So they actually got a slight damage buff. And that was just to ensure that there's a small amount of forgiveness for hitting non-chest shots. And that's primarily what we're going to be focusing on in today's video to see how much forgiveness each gun has. But before we do that, I know a big question that was up in the air with the addition of these is what happens if you shoot somebody through the arm and then into the chest? Are you going to be dealing arm damage because you hit the arm first, or are you dealing chest damage? And it turns out they handled this properly. You will be dealing chest damage in that situation. So it's always going to take the highest multiplier for whatever zone your bullet passed through. Next, I also briefly wanted to mention here, when it comes to headshot potential, if we're assuming that we're also hitting chest shots, so getting the standard amount of damage, it turns out even with that slight improvement to your headshot multipliers, I'm not seeing any changes here whatsoever in the number of headshots required combined with chest shots to reduce the number of shots to kill. So there's no benefit there to the higher headshot multiplier. And instead, that higher headshot multiplier, it's just going to be helping in situations where you're hitting limb shots, for instance. So if you hit too many limb shots, but then you throw a headshot in there, they'll often cancel each other out and allow you to maintain the optimal number of shots to kill to the body. So with that covered, let's get into limb forgiveness here. And I did go back and forth as to how I wanted to present this. I wanted to make sure it's not information overload or anything, and these graphics are going to be easy enough to read at a quick glance. And therefore, I went the route of just showing limb shot forgiveness. So the numbers that I've placed over each of these ranges is showing you the number of limb shots that you're allowed to mix in while still maintaining that number of shots to kill to the body. So in the case of the M433, for instance, in the maximum damage range, it's going to be a 4-shot kill if you're hitting chest shots. And after this update, we're allowed to mix 1 limb shot in with chest shots in order to maintain a 4-shot kill. Any more than 1 limb or lower torso shot, and now it's going to be a 5-shot kill, unless you're also mixing headshots into the equation. We're not factoring that into this graph because that just gets way too complicated. Just know that generally if you are mixing a headshot in, it's going to be canceling out those limb shots. But essentially, we can see for most of these assault rifles in most of the ranges, they've set it up in a way where you get that one forgiving shot where if you accidentally hit an arm or the lower torso, it's okay if you do it just once, you'll still maintain the same number of shots to kill, but any more than that, and it's now going to increase the number of shots to kill. Now, the exceptions here are going to be with 3-shot kill weapons, and this applies across the board beyond assault rifles as well. In these cases, you have 0 forgiveness. If you want that 3-shot kill, every single bullet needs to hit the chest, or again, you could be mixing a headshot in there if you want to maintain that 3-shot kill. Additionally, we can see with the NVO228E, in the second 2 damage ranges, there's a little bit of added forgiveness there. We can actually mix 2 limb shots in while still maintaining that optimal number of body shots to kill. So that's the assault rifles. Next, let's get into the carbines, and it's a fairly similar trend here, although there's a lot more situations where we're seeing that 2-shot limb forgiveness, like we saw with the NVO228E in the second 2 damage ranges. That applies to the M4, the AK205, the M417, the GRTBC, and the QBZ192. So that is quite nice for those guns to have that little bit of added forgiveness. Additionally, just like we saw with the assault rifles, when it comes to the 3-shot kill weapons, there's no body shot forgiveness there. You've got to be hitting nothing but chest shots or mixing a headshot in if you want to maintain that 3-shot kill. And then for everything else, you get that 1 free limb shot without reducing the number of shots to kill. Then for SMGs, very similar trend here. In most cases, you get that 1 free limb shot, but not in the case of the SCW-10 with its 3-shot kill range. And then in the case of the UMG-40 and the USG-90, we do get that 2-shot limb forgiveness in the second 2 damage ranges. And then finally, for these regular guns, we've got LMGs. And again, in most situations, you get that 1 limb shot forgiveness, with the exception being the 3-shot kill LMGs. There's no forgiveness there, and the RPKM does have the second 2 damage ranges, where 2 limb shots are allowed while maintaining the same number of shots to kill. So I hope those graphics were fairly easy to understand, and you can use those going forward as a reference for how forgiving things tend to be. Next, let's talk about DMRs, because these also saw new body multipliers, but this body multiplier is a little bit different at 0.91 to the limbs and lower torso. And then it's also worth noting, with DMRs, our headshot multipliers didn't change at all. And with these, we actually see a lot of forgiveness outside of their minimum damage ranges. As we can see here, for all of these DMRs, in their first 2 damage ranges, limb shots don't really matter. It's a 3-shot kill to the leg or a 3-shot kill to the chest with the M39 EMR, for instance. There's no change there, so you can mix as many limb shots in as you want, and it will never increase the number of shots it requires to kill, until you get to the minimum damage range, and in that case, you only get that 1 limb shot forgiveness with all of these DMRs. So this change is only going to be impacting them at longer ranges, although in the case of the SVK, we reach that minimum damage range much sooner than the other ones at just 21.25 meters, and therefore it is going to have the biggest negative impact on that gun in particular. Now finally, let's talk sniper rifles, because they also saw an adjustment to these multipliers, and while they did already previously have these lower damage zones to the arms, abdomen, and legs, they've reduced that multiplier from 0.8 down to 0.67, while maintaining the same chest and headshot multipliers. Now, generally speaking, what this means is within the maximum damage range of the sniper rifles, it's still going to take the same number of shots to kill to these same zones in the body, meaning all of the sniper rifles will be a 1-shot headshot up close, or a 2-shot kill anywhere in the body, whether you shoot them twice in the leg, or once in the leg, once in the chest, it doesn't matter, it'll still be a 2-shot kill just like pre-patch, even though we're dealing less damage per bullet. Although there is one exception there, and that is with the Mini Scout. Now you do need to land at least one of those 2 bullets to the chest, otherwise it will take up to 3 shots to kill, whereas previously it was maximum 2 shots to kill. Then when it comes to the sweet spot damage ranges, which they have adjusted, and here's just a quick reminder, I've already showed this off in a previous video, but they did shrink all of our sweet spot ranges on the sniper rifles, but within those sweet spot ranges, we're still getting a 1-shot kill to the chest, neck, or head, just like pre-patch, whereas if you're hitting anywhere else in the body, it's going to end up being a 2-shot kill. And then finally, when you get into their minimum damage range, so beyond their sweet spot ranges, this is where there's a little bit of a change. Now, the way this works is for all of the sniper rifles outside of the Mini Scout, we still do have a 2-shot kill potential to the body, but one of those 2 shots has to hit them in the chest. If you're not landing one of those shots to the chest, though, it will take you 3 shots to kill. And that wasn't the case before this update. At most with these sniper rifles, it would be a 2-shot kill. And then it is worth noting, in the case of the Mini Scout, this is dealing less damage, and in its minimum damage range, if you want to maintain a 2-shot kill, you have to hit both of those shots to the chest within that range. A single limb shot mixed in now makes it a 3-shot kill. And there we have it. That pretty much covers it for all of the body multiplier changes. And just to reiterate, the pistols still have the same body multipliers as previously, so no changes there. And in the case of Slug shotguns, I've had a few people asking me about that. You still don't have body multipliers when using slugs on a shotgun, so a shot to the leg is still equal to a shot to the chest with those. And overall, when it comes to these changes, I do like the fact that they slightly increased most of our damage values to allow for just a little bit of forgiveness, generally allowing 1 limb shot mixed in, while still maintaining the same number of shots to kill. And I think it is interesting that the 3-shot kill weapons that tend to have a really good time to kill potential don't give that same sort of forgiveness, so it's a little bit more high risk, high reward when using those guns. And that's not to mention the fact that headshots are now going to be a lot more useful, not in the sense of reducing the number of shots to kill from your potential, but instead they just help keep things a lot more consistent with your time to kill by effectively canceling out any limb shots that you would get in that gunfight. But in saying that, the one little critique that I have here is I do think they're maybe a little bit unforgiving in the sense that it's just the chest zone where you deal the full amount of damage. And I can't help but think that perhaps the lower torso should have also been included in there, especially since we saw an increase to the amount of dispersion or aim down sight spread with our gun with this update. I just think that chest zone is perhaps a little bit too small of a zone to be getting that consistent time to kill potential. Perhaps I'm being a little bit nitpicky there, but those are just my general thoughts on this. And I am very curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about these changes and recent additions to the extra body multiplier zones that will increase your time to kill if you're not consistently landing those chest shots or mixing a headshot in? Are you guys generally happy with this change, or maybe not so much? If you enjoyed this one, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.